It's not new, and that's one of the things that Sam is a real expert on this, and the documentation is incredible. This began more than 100 years ago. We trace it at least in part to John Dewey. Now, John Dewey was an American. He was a socialist, and he wasn't happy with the situation in America. It was a very biblically oriented country. There was a very firm Christian church, and everything was he considered to be individualistic and free market, and how can people have all this freedom to guide their own lives, and how can we centrally plan things if everybody knows how to read and can decide the future for themselves. So he set out to destroy that deliberately, and we reprinted one of his essays in our book that is just so revealing. I mean, he knew that this was an evil plan. He knew people would resist it if they knew about it. One of the quotes we quote a lot is, change must come gradually, because to force it unduly would favor a violent reaction and would jeopardize its ultimate success. So he knew that people would never tolerate this kind of insanity.
How is he? Let me ask you, Alex, before you remember where you were there, but let me just ask you, does he reason why he wants to do this? Is there an explanation why he sees that this is the better way to go in his writings?
He pointed to a novel. It was published in 1888 by Edward Bellamy called Looking Backward. And this was a novel. It was a fiction novel, right? And it was about a hypothetical communist utopia in the United States by the year 2000, where there would be no private property and kind of everything was collectivist and everything was for the good of the community. You probably hear this rhetoric a lot nowadays. Back then, that was extremely radical. People promoting no individual rights, everything should be for the good of collective. People would laugh at you and say that's quackery. But John Dewey thought that was a great idea, and the Rockefellers agreed. So they gave him millions and millions of dollars to promote this quackery. And the chief element of his strategy was to destroy the literacy of the American people. Now, at that time, we did have government schools. Government schools had been set up for the purpose of teaching kids to read so that they could read the Bible. America was a very, very Christian country at that time, and it was just obvious and well understood that everybody needs to be able to read the Bible, or you can't be a properly functioning human being. So everybody knew how to read. We were the most literate society on the planet at that time, and that troubled John Dewey. In this essay, The Primary Education Fetish, he openly expresses his disdain for this notion that kids need to learn how to read, and he considered reading to be a very individualistic activity. He thought it promoted individualism, and reading happens kind of in your own mind, right? It's just you and the book, or the author of the book, one-on-one. And he thought this promoted individualism and kind of the things he didn't like and that were incompatible with collectivism. So he set out to destroy that as well. He wanted to get rid of early literacy education. He not only didn't think it was necessary, he thought it was an evil. And maybe the most criminal thing he was responsible for, and this is probably going to sound outrageous to people. So what I encourage people to do, if you don't want to buy the book and read our documentation, look it up. The information is out there. He began pushing this method of reading called the look-say method. Sometimes it's called the whole word method or the sight method. There's a number of different terms that they use to conceal what they're doing. But the simplest way to summarize it is basically they're teaching children to read English or Swedish or whatever language that uses phonetic characters as if it were Chinese. So throughout the history of our language and our civilization, people have learned to read the phonetic way because we have a phonetic alphabet and a phonetic language. If you want to learn how to read, you need to know what sound each character makes, and you need to know how they interact with each other so you can decode the message. Now, John Dewey's method, the method he was promoting, this look-say, this sight method, you look at the word as a symbol, the word becomes a character in and of itself, just like how you would read Chinese. You have these symbols, and you look at the symbol, and then you extract from that the concept that the symbol is supposed to represent. Now, that alphabet, they don't have an alphabet. It's totally alien to our system. And John Dewey knew that this was quackery. They had done experiments with this in the 1800s, and they said, oh, my goodness, that's terrible. It doesn't work. Barely anybody can even learn how to read using this method. And so we definitely can't use this. And John Dewey said that means we definitely have to use that. And so he got money from the Rockefellers. He set up an experimental school where he used this. And, he produced a bunch of dyslexics who couldn't read. And he thought, this is great. This is what we need to do in the whole country. Started taking over educational colleges. And that's where we are today. The government schools all across this country are teaching children to read English as if it were Chinese. And that's why we have such widespread illiteracy. And the government acknowledges this illiteracy. In '93, they did a survey and they said 55% of American adults can barely read. They are functionally illiterate. This is outrageous. This is ridiculous. You can teach a 4-year-old how to read in a matter of weeks with the phonics method, which is the way that people have always learned how to read our alphabet and our language. But with the look-say method, with the sight method, they're graduating people out of high school who can't read their high school diploma.
It's amazing.
It's true.
Wow. Let me just ask you more about that, because I haven't heard of it. It means they have to have obviously a visual cue then, so that they teach us, as you say, with looking at it at the same time as they're saying it, to make and that's to change the association to each letter, correct?
Exactly. So instead of decoding the meaning of a word by what the letters sound like and what the word means, one of the ways they do is flashcards. They'll put a word on a flashcard and then maybe the picture of what that word is supposed to represent next to it. And then you're supposed to memorize what the word is. So if you see like a few squiggly lines in a particular order, that's supposed to be cat, but you don't determine that by saying oh, that spells cat. You determine it by looking at the word cat as a symbol and then realizing, okay, this symbol represents cat, and therefore when I see a symbol that looks like this, I need to think of a cat in my mind.
So the entire word, that's what you're saying, not only each letter, but actually what the entire word as a symbol.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Just like in Chinese. So the word becomes a symbol rather than letters. The letters are essentially irrelevant except for that they make up the symbol. This is absolute quackery. It produces dyslexia. It produces illiteracy. And the people responsible for foisting this on our government schools understood this 100% full well, and that's why they did it.
Wow. So when do you know if this is in place in Sweden, for example, and is it in place in most American schools now?
It's in place in most government schools in the United States and even in a lot of private schools. And actually, I was looking at some of the phonics reading books that are supposed to teach you how to read with phonics. And even these are teaching to read using the sight method, believe it or not. So parents need to be very wary of that. As far as Sweden goes, I actually don't know. But I do know that UNESCO is promoting this quackery for the entire world. We have a report where they say, phonics, yeah, it's okay. Maybe you can mix a little bit in there. But really what we need to be focusing on is the sight method. So UNESCO wants the entire world to learn to not read using this quack methodology.
We did a show on the dropping IQ levels worldwide due to heredity alone. When you add the aspect of just also the schooling system dumbing down, meaning that people, even if they were at their highest IQ level, we still wouldn't get there. But now, of course, we're not only they're not going to be able to enable the IQ that people already have by dumbing them down in this way. This is, the end results of this, Alex, is disastrous. If we look 20, 30 years down the line, even with more and more kids being educated, getting jobs and stuff like that. What's gonna happen here? It's going to just completely collapse if this continues.
Yeah, and the implications are so huge. It's frightening to even think about it because reading is really the key method where individuals are able to acquire knowledge independently. If you can read, you can research things yourself. You can read the Constitution and know what the Republic is supposed to stand for. You can read your Bible. You can read your history textbooks. You can read your science books. You can acquire knowledge on your own, independently. You don't need to rely on the fake media and the fake schools to have an understanding of things. You can learn the truth on your own. And when you reduce or remove the ability to gather knowledge independently, you end up with absolute ignorance, widespread ignorance, and no way of remedying it. Suppose somebody woke up and said, hey, I don't believe I've been told the truth, but hey, I can't read. So what am I going to do? I can try to watch videos or something. But, reading is absolutely essential to everything, to maintaining our civilization, to maintaining our liberty in the United States. If people can't read, if people can't read the Constitution, they don't even know what they're losing, much less how to protect it.
Yeah. So literally going backwards to the days when reading was kept out from certain people. Now, is this just done for control purposes then of starting really to guide where civilization is going, and that a selected few at the top are going to basically dictate to the rest of us a dumbed down kind of subclass, if you will, that are going to be easily controllable, or why do you think they're doing this?
That's exactly why they're doing this. I call it neo-feudalism sometimes. They kind of envision this world where they're going to be, the wonderful philosopher kings that Plato talked about, ruling and reigning over us dumb sheeple. They don't want educated citizens with the ability to acquire knowledge, messing up their plans. So if you look at, the divisions between, say, the ruling establishment and the rest of humanity, it becomes very clear. Bill Gates doesn't send his kid to a Common Core school, like I mentioned before. Obama doesn't send his kids to a Common Core school. None of the ruling class are putting their children through this fiasco, through this disaster. Their children are going to, some of the best schools in the world. And, I was very blessed to go to some of these schools. I went to literally, some of the best private schools on the planet. And so I was very blessed in that respect. But, what they're doing in the government schools, they're creating this chasm between the ruling class and the underclass that is going to be literally impossible to bridge. If you have no way to acquire knowledge, you have no hope of ever getting out of the underclass. Never. And that's the idea here. There's supposed to be a ruling class at the top, centrally planning and running everything to create this, they think maybe it's going to be a utopia. Maybe they're just wicked. But, there's not going to be much that the population is going to be able to do about it if they succeed in their plans.
Yeah, let's talk more about Common Core. I've been following this for the last few years, and I've seen some outrageous stuff in that time, and certain things that they're trying to push, some things that have been implemented already. But how does this snuck into the back door of the American education system? Or maybe it wasn't the back door.
In terms of the public understanding of it, it absolutely was the back door. You could have asked, you could have pulled 1 million people prior to, say, 2009, 2010, and probably not one of them would have been able to tell you what's going on here. Common Core, it basically wasn't announced really until 2013 when they thought it was just, too late for anybody to do anything about it. They said, oh, voila, we have national standards. Your state government or your education bureaucracy has approved them, and tough luck if you don't like it. So it absolutely came in the back door. But this has been a very long-term plan. And, it didn't start with the Obama administration. A lot of people make this out to be Obama's program. In a sense, it is. The Obama administration was crucial in getting it imposed on the states. But there was a lot of things that preceded Common Core that were absolutely fundamental in having it come about. So we can look at Bill Clinton, for example, and his efforts to start imposing national standards. Then we can look at the George Bush administration with the No Child Left Behind. They said, if you want federal money from the Department of Education, which the states should never have been taking in the first place, and the Congress should never have permitted in the first place. But if you want federal money for your government schools, you have to impose standards that we think are okay. You have to adopt a test to measure against those standards. So the road had been paved long before. Then Obama came in, during the economic crisis. All the state governments were paranoid. Oh, where are we going to get the money? We're going to have to lay off teachers, that kind of stuff. And so Obama came in with the stimulus money and said, hey, we have an idea. We'll give you billions of dollars if you just agree to surrender absolute and total control over your education system to this Common Core consortium. And it's not even really the government. Yeah, it was funded in large part by the federal government through a number of front groups and trade associations and establishment-connected organizations like Achieve Inc., which, of course, is run by Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg types. Mm-hmm. So this was all brought in through the back door. And then, we just woke up one morning, and I had been writing about it for a while when I first got a whiff about it. But as far as public understanding goes, probably still the majority of the American people don't know what's going on with Common Core. But, it's going to affect everyone here very soon.
Yeah, it's really scary. Now, detail to us, how do you think this is what's going to be added onto Common Core in the next